Now this is the story of the Old West, and it's a story of a man named Sylvester, and he was a dangerous gunslinger.
Yes, this is the Potholer 54 channel, just bear with me.
They were in this bar playing cards, and somebody was cheating, and next thing you know, they go for their guns. The guns are jerked, white gun smoke filled the room, and Sylvester got hit, took a bullet. Tried to shoot at him again, but he got away. He slipped out into the desert. He collapses face first into the ground, and he's a goner. And he starts drying and frying and mummifying.
And ends up here, at a Hall of Curiosities in Seattle, where visitors gawk at Sylvester's desert-dried mummy and take pictures of the blood-spattered bullet hole that killed him. At least that's what Arizona's state historian Marshall Trimble would have us believe. But what does science tell us? Well, an autopsy of the body revealed it hadn't been mummified by the dry desert heat at all, because it was dripping wet with embalming fluid. And scientists who undertook the autopsy on behalf of the History Channel found that the fluid was loaded with arsenic, a common embalmer's chemical used in the late 19th century. And they found the injection points in his legs, where the fluid was pumped into the veins. And when they checked the hole in his stomach, it wasn't consistent with a bullet, but a drill. And the so-called blood spatter around it wasn't blood, but red paint. And the autopsy revealed that Sylvester didn't die in a gunfight, he died of tuberculosis. So what does Arizona's state historian have to say now that a scientific analysis has shown that everything he believed was a crock?
Sylvester can be anybody we want him to be, and I want him to be a gunslinger.
That's right. He still wants to believe it. To some people it doesn't matter what the evidence is or what the science shows. For the truly deluded, if we want the gunslinger story to be true, then it's true.
Well, it's true for me. You see, I believe...
You mean true for you is different from true for anybody else?
It's a mindset, a human failing, that I've been trying to fathom for years. Of course, we all know that this kind of delusion is meat and potatoes for creationists.
Because the eye is so complex.
Here's one asking Richard Dawkins how evolution could make something as complex as an eye, a question Dawkins was able to answer quite easily.
You can make a slowly climbing ramp of improvement from just the very rudiments of vision, just say being able to tell the difference between light and shade, nothing more than that, right up to the perfection of a human eye or the eye of a hawk. I mean, there are flatworms that have just a cup for an eye, no lens, not even a pinhole. There are animals like Nautilus, which is a sort of coiled up squid kind of thing. Did you find that convincing, what I said about the eye?
Well, not really.
Now, you might think this guy went on to say he didn't understand the explanation, or he found a flaw in the explanation, or he questioned the evidence that supported it. But no, none of these. So what was the reason he didn't accept it?
Let me tell you what happened in my brain at that particular moment in time was that I was thinking of the book of Genesis, and where God says that he made everything according to its kind. Okay, you're probably not all that surprised. After all, he's a creationist. But this video isn't about why religious people delude themselves into disbelieving observable evidence and thinking that science is all a conspiracy. It's about why we still have that affliction even in a post-religious world. In Western countries where religion is in decline, people aren't necessarily falling in line with science and rational thinking. Instead, they're turning to wacky ideas they hear from the internet and believing, as Bill O'Reilly would put it, that even though science tells us it's wrong, it's true for them. It's as if the need to believe is so ingrained in us that having dispensed with gods and goddesses, we now have to substitute new beliefs that continue to contradict scientific evidence. I don't think there's a better example of this than the weird and wacky responses I got to my video, Expanding Earth My Arse. The video debunked the hilariously stupid claim of comic book artist Neil Adams that the Earth is growing and has doubled in size over the last 60 million years.
It's a shame that this video takes such a mocking tone.
Yes, I must admit the video did take on a rather mocking tone. After all, I thought no one still believes in a flat Earth, an expanding Earth, a hollow Earth, or an Earth made out of sponge cake. These are ideas expounded by lone nutcases who used to sit next to you in a pub and bother you with their conspiracy theories.
Did you know that the whale is not really a fish? It's an insect.
But I hadn't counted on the power of the internet to bring all these lone nutcases and their myriad conspiracy theories together into one virtual room. Just like Sylvester the Gunslinger, the physics of the Earth can be whatever they want it to be.
I watched this video expecting an intelligent counter-argument, but got a video making fun of people.
Oh, you mean the intelligent counter-argument that we can measure the Earth's size and its mass, and neither is growing.
An observation is not disproved by the inability of the observer to account for it.
No, an observation is disproved right from the start when there's no observation. Look, if I stick a rock on some bathroom scales and measure its dimensions and its weight and leave it overnight and it hasn't grown in size, then I'm not making an observation that it's got bigger. Is it just me? I explained all this in the video. I don't know how much clearer it can be. Scientists know the Earth isn't growing because, just like this rock, they can measure the distance of various points of the Earth's surface from satellites, and what they found is exactly what was predicted by plate tectonics. Uplift in mountain ranges where plates are colliding, and depression at subduction zones where plates are being pushed down, and no net growth. They've measured how much the Earth as a whole expands and contracts every year, and found the answer was 0.1 millimeters in both directions, with no net expansion. And we can measure the Earth's mass, too. Despite the fact that the Earth is neither getting bigger or heavier, like Sylvester the Gunslinger, the Earth is growing if they want it to be growing. So all they need to do is explain why. One guy thinks helium is being produced in the center of the Earth and it's blowing up like a balloon. Another, there's a star inside the Earth. Or the increased mass comes from trapped neutrinos ejected by the sun. Electron valence shells are expanding. The Earth's a sun. Frozen gases are erupting through weak points. The core is bubbly. It's expanding because it's getting hotter. Recycled materials and volcanoes are making it bigger, says one guy. You're closed-minded and sad. No, that's not my description of him. That's his description of me.
Can you come up with any of your own theories?
No, because you don't need my theory to explain something that we know is not happening.
What the hell is wrong with you people?
Several people were convinced that sunlight falling on the Earth turns into matter.
Plant life doesn't add mass also? Then I must take some biology classes.
Yes! Please, take some biology classes, and if you can't afford them, then take just one biology class and make it on the subject of where plants get their carbon, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, and hydrogen from. Even if they made sense, which they don't, we don't need any of these wacky, stupid, dreamed-up ideas to explain something that's not happening. Look, can we just go back to the rock? See the rock? Now, it's sitting in the garden doing nothing, so what's causing it to get bigger?
Maybe little rock elves inside are throwing up from a fusion reactor.
No, don't try to explain it. It's a stupid question because it's not getting bigger. Okay, look, here's the White House. Why is it painted red? Aliens may have painted blood from executions carried out by the government in secret. No, I don't need an explanation of why it's painted red because it's not f***ing painted red. Don't you get it? Now, please stop because I'm getting a headache. I'm going to lie down.
You are astoundingly ignorant.
Who let you in?
As the Earth is growing, and growing it is.
Shut up! I don't care.
I assure you the planet is gaining mass, has been gaining mass, and will continue to do so as long as it exists as a planet.
Will you shut up?
On a clear night, take some time and spend it gazing at the beautiful night sky, and I promise you, you shall bear witness to the miracle of meteors as they crash into the eye to start all over again. Behold, the truth is but a blink away. Potholer, I am shocked you cannot know this. Well, you do now.
Oh, for f***'s sake, do some maths. All the dust and meteorites falling from space every year amount to barely 40,000 tons, about the size of the Jefferson Memorial. Even if it's been 100 times that amount every year for the last 60 million years, that's still around a trillionth the size of the Earth, and it doesn't even come close to doubling its size. So why are so many people having so much trouble accepting basic science? The author of the Growing Earth video, Neil Adams, says he questioned science when he learned about the creation of matter at the start of the Big Bang, and it sounded to him like magic. That's why I always advise people to do this multiple choice if something in science doesn't make sense to them. You have to conclude that either research scientists are all incompetent, or they're all in on a conspiracy, or they know something you don't. So find out what it is. Sadly, Neil went for option 2, and then made up his own science, which he calls new science. Whenever he was told it conflicted with some fundamental laws of physics, he decided these laws must be wrong. Yes, you can do that when you make up your own science. Trouble is, it's very easy to prove or disprove a law of physics, because unlike a theory, a law is basically a mathematical equation. To disprove it, all you have to do is input the figures and show that the equation doesn't balance. So in the comments forum I established up front which laws Neil accepts and which he rejects. And he told me he doesn't accept this, Newton's law of universal gravitation. But for a very interesting reason, because the moon is receding from the Earth. And Newton says it shouldn't. Well, Newton may say it shouldn't, but Newton's law says it should. This was a problem for Newton because he believed that a God-given universe ought to be perfect and have perfect orbits. His law showed that orbits would be influenced by the gravitational attraction of other objects. So Newton reasoned that God would make constant adjustments to keep all the orbits stable. The way to disprove Newton's law isn't to invoke Newton's belief in divine intervention, but to input the figures and show the equation doesn't balance. So I asked Neil to show his calculations. If the equation doesn't balance, then Neil can definitively prove his new science is right. In response to my request, here are his calculations. Well, what were you expecting? Did you really think he was going to present the world with a calculation showing that one of the most famous and fundamental laws of physics is wrong? Of course not. Instead, when I asked him to produce his calculations, I was met with evasion, delay, waffle, diversion, and of course personal attacks. But at the end of it, Neil had to admit he didn't know the figures, he hadn't worked it out, and what's all this math got to do with it anyway? His ideas, he said, are just concepts. You don't need math to work all this out, just instinct. In fact, the law fits perfectly with the recession of the moon, and it's not that hard to see why. As the Earth rotates, the gravitational attraction of the moon causes a tidal bulge, which rotates ahead of the moon's orbit. The effect is to slow the Earth down over time and effectively transfer this energy to the moon, taking it into a higher orbit. The law tells us that the force of gravitational attraction is the universal constant times the mass of the Earth times the mass of the moon divided by the distance between them squared. And from Newton's second law we know that force equals mass times acceleration, and centripetal acceleration is the velocity of the orbiting body squared divided by the radius. This may look hard, but it's a simple question of substituting letters in the equation, which we all learn to do in elementary school. A is v squared over r, so let's do that substitution. And since this force is the same as this force, the other two sides of the equation must also be equal. And since some of the values on both sides of the equation are equal, they cancel each other out. And so we're left with an equation that tells us the velocity of the moon squared equals the gravitational constant times the mass of the Earth divided by the distance between them. In other words, the law tells us that as the moon moves into a higher orbit and r increases, then the velocity v has to decrease in order for the equation to balance. And that's exactly what we find. The law balances perfectly according to everyone who's worked it out. It doesn't balance according to Neil Adams, who hasn't worked it out. Neil, if you still want to insist that the law doesn't work in the case of the Earth-Moon orbit, then all you have to do is input your figures and show that you're right. Why won't he do it? Well, no prizes for guessing. And while he's at it, show us how the supposed increased mass and radius of this growing Earth would affect the Earth's rotational velocity, which is the other point I raised. Neil told me he accepted the law of conservation of angular momentum, but after offering up a variety of spurious excuses, he finally admitted he didn't know whether an increasing mass and radius would speed up the Earth's rotation, slow it down, or keep it the same. Now this is very basic physics. On any rotating body, either extra mass or an increasing radius, or a combination of both, would slow down the rotational speed. And because it's a law of physics, once again, it's governed by a mathematical equation. So increasing the mass and radius of the Earth would make an Earth day longer. So here's a tip. If you're going to invent a new science and claim to have all the answers, then at least try to familiarize yourself with the physical laws you claim to accept or reject. Okay, I do sympathize with Neil. If you don't understand scientific explanations for natural phenomena, then of course they must seem like magic.
Tide goes in, tide goes out. You can't explain that.
In the past, people attributed these natural phenomena to gods, goddesses, and spirits. In this post-religious age, if they don't accept the scientific explanations, they seek answers in conspiracies.
What the heck is in our water supply? What the heck is in our oxygen supply that create a rainbow effect in a sprinkler?
One of the most common things I read on my channel are posts from people who say they like my videos debunking religious belief, but don't agree with my debunking of whatever it is they believe. But the point I'm making is that if you're going to reject or cherry-pick science to support your beliefs, then it doesn't matter whether those beliefs are religious, ideological, humanitarian, or anything else. You're changing reality to fit your conclusions. That's the exact opposite of science. The answer to things we don't understand isn't to assume that scientists must be conspiring against us, but to accept that we don't understand it. Take a tip from Clint Eastwood.
Man's got to know his limitations.
So instead of making assertions like dinosaurs could not have lived on an Earth this size, put it in the form of a question. What do researchers say allowed dinosaurs to live on an Earth this size? Find out what it is the researchers know that you don't. Instead of claiming that the Earth is cooling because ice sheets have increased 60% one year, put this in the form of a question. Why do researchers still insist that ice sheets are shrinking? In other words, instead of assuming a conspiracy, find out what it is they know that you don't. Sometimes they do ask questions, but end up completely ignoring the answer. For example, a lot of people asked how the oldest oceanic crust is much younger than the oldest continental crust. This is something I explained in the video. The answer is that oceanic plates are continuously being created and subducted, while continental plates aren't. And once you've asked the question and seen the answer that researchers have laid out in research journals and textbooks and been shown the measurements and the evidence, don't hide behind scientific conspiracy crap simply because you don't want to change your beliefs. I don't care if you're an atheist, an agnostic, or the sugar plum fairy. That's no different to religious belief. Some people wonder why I bother trying to correct all these idiotic fantasies. Does it matter? Yes! Science is the foundation of our modern technological society, and you should be worried that an increasing number of people are not only dropping out of science subjects in school, they're turning to whacked-out nonsense based on the idea that science is all a conspiracy. As more people distrust science, they're failing to vaccinate their children. We're seeing a re-emergence of diseases that science had eradicated. If governments base their decisions on superstitions and beliefs, rather than on hard science, then we're going to suffer the consequences. You know, Johannes Kepler spent 5 years going through thousands of pieces of observational data to work out how the planets orbit the sun. He would have given his right arm to have known the answer. We have the luxury of being able to learn about planetary orbits at the click of a button, and we're too lazy or stupid or too uninquiring to do it. Instead, we'd rather make something up. Now, I've been a bit harsh in this video, so if I've embarrassed anyone or made them look stupid, good! You should feel embarrassed. You deserve to be laughed at, because your brand of stupidity is dangerous. And don't bother telling me how arrogant I am for calling all these conspiracy theorists stupid, because I'm always happy to admit that I'm stupid too. This is one of the few things Neil Adams got right. Nothing wrong with being too stupid to understand the kind of science that PhD physicists understand. That's the case not just for me, but for 99.9% of the population. The difference is I accept that I'm too stupid to understand it. So when something in science doesn't make sense to me, I don't assume it's because scientists are incompetent or devious. I either try to find out what it is I don't understand, or if I'm too stupid to wrap my head around it, which is often the case, then I follow the Clint Eastwood philosophy and accept my limitations. I don't go bounding off to create my own version of science light, which is science based on belief without the need for any complicated mathematical equations.
The interesting fact about the Arab is he can go for a whole year. He can go for a whole year on one grain of rice.
Neil Adams has done more to bring the fact of Earth's expansion to millions of people than anyone.
Oh, God, another armchair scientist still posting in support of this crap.
We have no place in official accepted science. Thankfully, that gives us the freedom to state our beliefs and theories. We're not paid to toe,
I think he means toe,
the line by any university or government agency.
Well, if scientific discoveries at universities and scientific institutions are all conspiracy-led crap, then why bother with it? Do away with science class in school, and science degrees, and scientific research. Let's all sit in armchairs and make up theories, and put our beliefs into chat rooms and videos, and the belief or theory with the most number of likes gets to be true.
Long live free thinkers.
Oh, is that what you are? Presumably free from the constraint of having to make your conclusion fit observations, or use math, or have your work fact-checked. Yeah, sounds groovy. The problem is, while you attack those who did stay awake in science class and did take the time to study and get degrees and spend years doing painstaking research for a pittance, you have the gall to use the technology they've created to do it with. When you use a computer to write your comments and blogs, you're using a machine that depends on Ohm's law and Kirchhoff's law. When you phone your friends to tell them Newton's law of universal gravitation is wrong, you're using satellite technology that depends on Newton's law of gravitation to get that message through. When you start your stupid car to attend your stupid meeting with other stupid New Age flat hollow growing sponge cake earth delusionist nutjobs, your starter motor depends on Faraday's law, and the oil it runs on was found using Snell's law, and the engine depends on the laws of thermodynamics. So the next time a stupid thought bubble enters your head and you feel like telling the rest of the world about it, just stop and do what I do. If my stupid thought is at odds with known and accepted science and physical laws, then I have only three options, and you know what they are. Either scientists are all incompetent, or they're all in on a conspiracy, or they know something I don't, and I need to find out what that is. Hint: try option 3 first.